If you're listening to this, there's a good chance you work within the real estate investing industry. There's another good chance that you would like to increase the sales of your products or services. Well, you're in the right place. United States Real Estate Investor is a platform you need to place your brand directly in front of your target audience. With our focused, growing audience of real estate investing beginners, enthusiasts, and seasoned professionals, you can continually reach our captivated viewers and listeners with ease. To learn more or to get started today, just visit UnitedStatesRealEstateInvestor.com/advertising. That's UnitedStatesRealEstateInvestor.com/advertising. Get ready to increase your brand awareness and your bottom line. Attract clients with content.
Universe Media Network.
Welcome to This Month in Real Estate Investing, where we separate the noise from the news. I'm your host, James Brown, and I show people how they can make safe, secure returns through our pre-vetted passive investments. Feel free to download our ebook, The Astute Investor, where we share the top 10 mistakes investors make and how to avoid them. Or you can join our private investor club so you can get exclusive opportunity alerts that we don't advertise to the general public. Just go to acceleratemycapital.com. In this episode, we'll be breaking down a variety of real estate investing news items, including Mamdani's Landlord government blueprint, Trump's 50-year mortgage shock, and investors take over America's Heartland. And don't forget, if you're watching live on YouTube, you can share your thoughts and questions during the show. Let's start the show. Well, I'm super excited to have our guest experts today. It's going to be a great show. If you like this show, don't forget to like, subscribe, or follow, the routine, so that we can continue bringing you the latest news and the best guests like we have today. Our guests today are Nathan Turner. I think, Nathan, you've been on probably 4 or 5 times now, and new to the show, Damian Lupo. So, Nathan, you want to share first, what your background is, what types of investing you focus on, and then Damian can jump in after that.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, great to be here again. This is one of my favorite ones, to be honest. A lot of fun.
Nice.
So I've been around in real estate for a long time. I started doing fix and flip way back when, 20 years ago, and for the last 15 years, I've been just involved with mortgage notes. So I started off with buying non-performing, delinquent, defaulted notes. And nowadays I've got a fund where we're buying performing notes where people are making regular payments and offer that to passive investors. That's me in a nutshell. That's the short version.
Fantastic. Damian.
So it's kind of similar timeline. 25 years ago, started buying properties after going to some seminars and didn't have any money, but I had a lot of ambition. Did a bunch of real estate, made a bunch of money, made millions of dollars, lost 25 million in 2008. And rebooted my life and restarted. And between the start of the real estate stuff back then and today, have started over 70 companies. The main focus for what I do, well known for EQRP, having launched that brand about 10 years ago in self-directed retirement investing. And today I've been building manufacturing facilities for high-tech disruptive space in construction to actually build the housing that's missing in America. So frame tech has been my focus for the last 4 years, and it's expanding across the country. And that's what I'm spending my time doing. It's plenty big to be the only thing. When people say, what's next? And I say, there's no room for next right now. This is it.
Nice. Oh, awesome. Glad to have you on. Well, thank you all for being here today. Let's dive into the news from United States Real Estate Investor. Data center domination, the war for power, peace, and property lines. this dives into data centers growing, and they're talking about how much power and water these are consuming, and then how it's affecting local communities. You guys have any thoughts on this? You know what's going on?
I think that this is a train that's on a one-way trip, and I think anybody that thinks it's anything else is crazy. And if they think that it's gonna slow down, it's not. It's gonna accelerate. It's a global war. I mean, we have hot wars, we have cold wars, and we have data and tech wars. And I mean, this kind of goes into play between AI and the crypto space. So one thing to do is not argue with it. Whenever something is true, instead of bitching about it, the good idea is to say, do I want to participate or do I want to get out of the way? But I think that this is something that people need to pay attention to and then work around it. Because if you fight it, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's happening. So either get on board or get out of the way is I think you're right on the money there, Damien. I think one of the issues is that they're coming in and they're kind of sneaking in to these different areas where they're setting up these dummy LLCs, and then all of a sudden, oh, whoops, hey, now we're going to be building this thing. I think that's really what the issue is. And so I'm not a big fan of a lot of government intervention. In this case, it may be wise to have something in place so that there's some instruction on where they can and cannot be, just for housing. And I mean, zoning is always ever-changing landscape, and that's a tricky one to navigate. But if we can figure out exactly where they're going to be and say, okay, this is your spot, this is my spot, and then kind of separate it out that way, that's probably for the best. But again, how do you actually do that? And as it's growing and faster, it's hard to get a hold of this one. So this is a tricky one.
Yeah, there's a lot of money behind it, and money can influence the governments and slip in the back door, like it sounds like is happening, right?
Yeah.
I keep thinking, that it takes water, right? And water is a limited resource. We're all affected by it. I've got a friend in that world, and the stories I hear from behind the scenes are really scary, frustrating. Just it's ridiculous. And being here in Colorado, we're a source for water, flows downhill, and it ends up at a trickle. It gets to the oceans. And so it makes me think, what about using ocean water instead of, our rivers and lakes that we need for drinking, right? But then you got the issues of, well, it's got to be on a coast or out in the ocean, and then you're affecting sea life. And, there's probably no perfect solution. But like you said, Damien, it's a train that it's just going to keep going, right?
It kind of reminds me of when China was balking at Bitcoin, and they said, we're not going to allow this. And then the rest of the world said, okay, we're going to do it. And then they said, wait, maybe we actually should participate because we're deconnecting ourselves from the future of what's going on. And so the market's going to figure this out in a lot of ways, unless you're Houston, where there's no zoning whatsoever and anything can be anywhere. Most places do have zoning. So I think I'm more inclined. I'm in Sedona in Arizona, and we have a huge problem with Airbnbs because it's kind of a free-for-all, and it changes the nature of the entire community. Like, it turns into a not community. It's just transient. With data centers, I'm more inclined, like with Nathan being the suggestion of being fairly hands-off. I don't know that unless you start doing central planning, and we're going to talk about Mamdani and his central planning focus and adventure, but it's pretty tricky unless you start completely taking hold of the entire ecosystem to say, well, we want to put a data center right here. There's too many levers, and trying to do that, guess what? Money and capital goes somewhere else where it's not going to be so. It's like trying to do things in California. There's a reason I haven't invested there. It's just like you get beat up. And so I think that'd be a place that would force a lot of capital and the development to other jurisdictions. And that's not what people want. These jurisdictions want the jobs, they want the revenue, they want the capital. So I think it's a dance. It's going to be a little bit ugly, but it's happening fast, and getting in the way of it, people will just pivot.
I agree. And trying to say, okay, central planning, we're going to say, okay, data centers here, and here. And then we find out 3 years down the road, oh, we need twice as many data centers as we did before because people are just using it more, and it's, much more involved than we thought it was going to be. Well, now what? Now we're in a situation where we've already designated these areas. Nobody else can go anywhere else. And so then we're back to square one again, and we're tripping over each other again. So like you say, there's really no perfect solution here. It's going to be a tricky time with the emergence of AI and the adoption of it and how quickly it's gaining popularity. It's making it tough. There's things that we're going to have to figure out as we go. And this is one of those.
Yeah. Hey, Damien, there's a huge facility up north of Phoenix. I remember seeing when we were camped out on that state trust land up there. Is that a data facility or a chip manufacturer? Are you familiar with that?
I think you're talking about the TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. I think
semiconductor,
off at 17. So that's part of the big chip rollout in the U.S. That's one of the main facilities here. I mean, Arizona is a perfect environment because of the lack of humidity, so you can build these things. It's a multi-year project, and we need a lot more of those. It's kind of like the power situation in general. If you look at, I like using China as an example because they're saying, here's the problem, here's how we solve it, and then they just blaze through it. Whereas here you get stuck in red tape, bureaucracy, and everybody trying to get a piece of the pie. I'm not saying China's the right path. I'm just saying when they're building what they need, they say we need this much power, and they're popping up a new nuclear facility every month or two. And we're building out chip centers, but it takes forever because of all of the bureaucracy and unions, and there's just a lot that slows everything down. So it's there. It's been under construction for years, and I don't know when that thing's coming online, but we need it yesterday.
Oh, it's still not online. I just assumed it was built out. That's huge. Like you drive by, you're like, what the hell is that?
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes even beyond that, because you're looking, okay, so we say here's going to be a data center. Even, let's say they got into a residential neighborhood, all that. Okay, how's the infrastructure going to support that? I mean, just, pipes, roads, all those different things are going to have to be now rearranged and probably, rerouted from some of the residential properties that are there. And again, there's no perfect solution. This is a toughie.
There's an example. My partner at Frame Tech, we used to work up in North Dakota during the Balkan boom, where literally overnight it was just they needed tens or hundreds of thousands of people, and they had no housing, and they were trying to build all this stuff overnight, and they didn't have anything. I mean, it was like a little teeny town, and all of a sudden you've got Austin that moves in, and it was chaos. And so in a lot of ways we're seeing that, but it's all over the place where places are trying to navigate. And then school systems, what do? You got to build all these new school systems. Like there's a ripple, and it's just ugly for a while. There is no clean path. And a big part of that is most politicians and planners are very, very short-sighted. They don't have even if they have a long-term vision. I saw this in Austin when I lived there. You have a big vision, but you've got to get people have to get elected. And so it's hard to get people to buy into something where you're putting in massive infrastructure, tons and tons, billions and billions of dollars. People are very short-sighted. They say, what's in it for me today? I don't know if I'll be here. I don't want to invest in 30 years. So that's one of the problems. We're very short-sighted. We have 2-year election cycles. Whereas if you go to Asia, all along, whether it's China or Japan, it's a lot longer term. It's 100 years or 1,000 years. Here it's 2 at best. Mm-hmm. So that's a big part of the problem.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, let's jump to our next news item from 12 News Phoenix. 2 women tried to sell a Scottsdale home they didn't even own, police say. They were actually arrested for stealing a vacant home's title, changing its looks, and trying to sell it under a fake inheritance story. Keep seeing this over and over. I don't know.
I'm actually surprised this hadn't happened more. I mean, it seems like, I sometimes if you're gonna get in front of this, like, what do you do about these things? One, you almost have to become a sociopath, like go into the mindset of a sociopath. How do you get in front of them? If you think like a logical person that plays by rules, you're gonna get run over. Like, you have to step out and not become it. But like, what? And I think about that and I go, man, there's just a million ways, because you can do stuff like this. It doesn't mean you're not gonna get caught, but I look at this and I laugh over the last 25 years and think, how have I not seen more of these articles? Maybe they're just not out there, but it seems like it should be a lot more common, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I've got one that's at one point I'll write it all down and we'll make it into a book, I think. But I've got a property in Chicago, so I buy loans. So I bought the mortgage on this property in Chicago just at the tail end of the foreclosure. Problem was the foreclosure finished February 2020. And in March 2020, of course, we all went into lockdown. Illinois was really stringent on their COVID rules and everything. And so come April, I had somebody say, hey, I can come in and do some repairs on this property. And I'm like, I'm not there. I can't be there. So yep, go ahead, do it. Had the house under contract for sale in July, only to find out that the people who had originally done those repairs had actually moved in. And we've spent the last 5 years, we're coming up on our 6th year now, trying to get them out of that property. And it's just been an absolute nightmare. So they haven't affected title, but they've moved right in. They changed water into their name. They put a security system in their name on the property, like all these things. And there's very little we can do with the court system and everything else. And it's just been an ongoing nightmare.
Wow. I missed where it was. What state was it?
This is in Chicago, Illinois.
Chicago.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me. I mean, so I would think, if I was naive, I would think, oh yeah, you could have that stuff happen in Chicago because it's corrupt. It could be in New York or LA or whatever. Like there's all these places. But I think back to when I was doing real estate in Arizona, I thought that was relatively law abiding. And I think about my first book was how I lost my first $1 million in real estate. It was called Maverick Mistakes in Real Estate Investing. And one of the funnier ones was somebody I knew. It was a friend of a coworker that sold me her house, and she gave me, it was a deed. I bought a deed for, I think it was $1,000 or $2,000. I gave it to her, and I go to the house, and I walked up and I looked around, and there's some people that were doing some work on the house. And I said, what are you doing here? They said, we're working on our house. What are you doing here? And I said, I'm wondering why you're in my house. And they said, this is our house. We bought this house. And I said, you bought it from Michelle? And they said, yeah. And I said, I've got a deed. And they said, did you record it? And I said, well, not yet. And so she had sold the house to multiple people. And I called her up because I knew her. I thought a friend. She actually starred in the book. So I got a little payback when I got to publish the story and called her out. But she said, well, you should have known better. You're a pro. And so in her mind, it was no big deal to steal from the rich guy. And I'm thinking, rich, I'm like trying not to starve to death. It was, and so there was a mentality that was okay. And it was like, it didn't impact anybody. So there's a never-ending supply of people that can justify their malfeasance and fraud to enrich themselves. And the worse the economy gets for most people, the more people will find ways to justify that. And that's one of the most dangerous things now. I think you're going to see more stories like people selling Scottsdale homes that they didn't own. People are going to get creative because they're going to get desperate, more desperate. And that's the concern here is people that are newer to investing. Or even if you just own a house, you inherit a house, or there's a million things. Being new, you don't have any emotional intelligence. You don't have the wisdom where your spidey senses click because you don't have any experience. And I think people are going to get taken advantage of. And so this is why it's really important to be around people that, like Nathan and I, are very bald, that have, like this experience of going through the crap, and we can see around the corner, because most people have no idea what's coming. There's a train coming at them and they don't even know it. Yeah.
It's a tricky one. And like you said, Damien, like trying to get myself into the mindset of the bad guys. I can't come up with these different ways that they're trying to do this and that and take advantage this way and that way. I can't even think of those kinds of schemes, and yet they happen every day.
It's a good point about the experience. Like for me, I'm much quicker to find the red flags, and like when we've done multifamily syndications as an example, we're looking for partners that have been in this a while, that have taken their lumps, they've lost money and come out of the fire and know what to do now, what to avoid. So that's super important.
So they do have, I mentioned it in our prep notes here about like title solutions where you can get flagged if something comes up. That does exist, and it's definitely something worth looking at. Is have the title company monitor the title on a regular basis and then send you a flag to say, hey, by the way, somebody just recorded a new deed on there. Was that you? No, it wasn't. And then you can nip it in the bud and get after it quicker than later, or, sooner than later, and hopefully fix it. That's the trick.
Go ahead.
This is like identity theft or different types of insurance. It's such a simple thing, and virtually nobody thinks about this. They're like, oh, it's recorded. Yeah. And it's not overly, yes, Nathan, it's true. It's not really a good practice to become skilled in being a sociopath.
Yeah.
But the reality is a lot of people are practicing and they're training. And so this is one of those really smart things to, that kind of service, title company or third parties or whatever, but being alerted. It's like having your stuff tracked on the dark web. You want to know if you're being traded on the dark web, because most people are in some form or fashion from data breaches.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it seems like there's got to be more guards in place so you don't have to have that monitoring, or maybe it's both, right? And then penalties. Obviously, some of these people are going to jail. So
Yeah.
more people that are thinking about doing this need to realize that, yeah, we could go to jail. We think we're just kind of skirting around things, but
one of the things that people don't think about is that crime has become digital and it's become international. So it's not really that big of a leap to think about the millions of people around the world, whether they're in Africa, and like there's these different, the Nairobi princes and that are doing things to try to scam people because they're lonely, or the data centers, the bot centers. I mean, there are facilities. About 4 years ago, I was dating a congresswoman that was telling me about some of the stuff that was going on when she was over in Taiwan with China, and in between China and Russia and Ukraine and all these places that are building these facilities with people that are in there. Their job is to extract cash in some way, whether it's dollars or it's Bitcoin or it's whatever. They're trying to get it out, and there's no way that we're going to be able to stop that in terms of like arresting people, because they're not in the US. Like there's a lot of people, and because it's digital, I mean, you can have things notarized now, and I'm sure there's scams to get digital notary, like over the internet. In 10 minutes, you can have something notarized, and then you have something you can record, and all this stuff can be done remotely. So there's, as much as we'd like to say, you think about guardrails, I don't know what that is other than things like the blockchain guardrails, where things are there. We take away the ability for things to manipulate code. If code is in place and it's open source, I think you have a lot of potential for protecting people. If it's not, the human element is going to kind of hose us, unfortunately, because it's just widely open and exposed.
yeah,
it's toughy. Go ahead, James.
I was just going to say, so when crime's faceless, like you're not eye to eye and you're screwing somebody over, when it's just some name in another country, it's a lot easier to probably get over that ethical hurdle,
It's interesting with that case that I was mentioning in Illinois, when at the final step of the eviction that we got 2 years ago, the judge actually called this person out and said, here's what I think happened, and walked through a whole scenario. And honestly, I hadn't come up with that, but he mapped it right out. He's like, I think you were going down the street, saw this vacant property, looked up on county records, saw that this guy's out of the country, and you just took advantage. And here we are today, this many years later, and still working on it. And he called it, and I think he's exactly right. But yeah, like to your point, it's all digital. I live in Canada. Everything I own is in the US. Everything I do is in the US. I'm always digital. And so it opens that door, like you say, Damien. Like I use digital notaries all the time because it's far more convenient for me than to try to get on a plane or even to go anywhere to go and try to find a notary that can sign for the US. So it's far more convenient, but it opens doors for fraud, different things that can happen.
Yeah. The easier it is, the more people are going to try to slip in there and yank their cash. And I'm sure we'll talk about the idea of speculating in places versus long-term and fundamental stuff, but people are looking for fast ways to make money. And this is one of those things. Digital speeds everything up 1,000-fold.
Yeah.
I just had somebody go through my truck, rifle through it. I got in there, it was like stuff strewn all over, and they didn't break a window. I must have just forgot to lock it one time. Like I always think I lock it, but somebody got in there, got through, took a few things, but it was easy. To your point, it's like if you make it easy, you almost can't blame them.
Yeah.
This is one of my rules. If in the area, if I'm actually there and it's a crazy, like the philosophy of the people locally is crazy to me, I'm not going to touch it. Not going to do business there. Not going to invest there. And one of the things I heard about, I forget which cities this was happening in, but people, I think it was in San Francisco, people were keeping their doors unlocked and their windows down. And they were taking everything out because they didn't want people to break their windows. They're like, look, they're going to come into my car. At least they can see there's nothing there. And if they want to check, they can get in without breaking the window. And I thought, okay, that's just a level of chaos that I'm not willing to participate in. But that's what people felt like they needed to do because the laws weren't being enforced and people were able to break windows like it was nothing. So I just laughed and said, okay, I'm staying away from there.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. I've got a friend that goes to, I forget which island it is, to go kiteboarding and windsurfing. And it's that bad there. You just, don't lock your car or you're going to have a broken window. Sad. I'm like, why do you go there? Well,
Yeah.
People tolerate enough. And there's a quote that I've lived by, and people will take as much as you'll allow. And so you have to be willing. And for most people, it's frustrating when you live somewhere because oftentimes it's a lot. It'd be nice to think about changing something instead of moving, but changing a culture or the laws in a place requires potentially years or decades, and you give up your life. And the question is, where are you going to be respected? And I think now for most people, you have the opportunity, the option to be places where you're respected, and your capital is respected. And some places are sunny. Like, I used to live in California, lived there a couple of times, but that place doesn't respect me and it doesn't respect my capital the way other places do. And so unfortunately, it's not going to be a place that I'm willing to go to other than maybe to visit, because it's beautiful, but that's one of the decisions. It's why there's so much capital and people that are moving from California to Texas or here in Arizona, or Tennessee or whatever. They say it's not worth the fight. There's got to be other things that are more worthy of me fighting for that I'm probably going to be able to impact change on, as opposed to, figuring out how to get people to stop breaking into my car.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the next article from United States Real Estate Investor. Fannie Mae kills credit wall. Investors could pay the price. So they're removing the 620, potentially. I don't think it's gone through, but potentially removing the 620 minimum credit score. Easy for me to say, which will shift mortgage approvals to desktop underwriting's internal risk engine, meaning that the lenders themselves are going to have to go through the credits situation and determine whether it's a risk they want to take. So hopefully I explained that well enough.
Yeah, they're talking.
Isn't this kind of like back in the early 2000s when all the creative geniuses at Countrywide said, Ninja sounds good. Let's do a no income, no assets, no jobs, and that'll be fine. Like, who cares if they don't have a credit score that's 620? They can't pay their bills, but I'm sure it'll end well with the mortgage. Like, who thinks that's a good? I mean, the people that think that's a good idea are the ones that are getting fees, the ones that are trying to stimulate an economy or keep political people in power. Whether it's Congress or whatever. There's an underlying agenda here. It doesn't make any rational sense unless you think about who's promoting it, and then it makes perfect rational sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this. Like you say, that's all that stuff. That's what created what I do today. So part of me is like, go for it. That sounds awesome. Do that. That's what we saw. And the interesting thing with the credit score is we still put a lot of stock into that collectively, which I also find kind of interesting because when I look through a credit report, more than half the time it's if it's a bad score, it's because they have some kind of medical something on there. To me, when I look at that and I go, okay, if there was a medical situation and then that's how they got into trouble, that's completely understandable and it's totally out of their control. Therefore, to me, if it's at a 580 because they had a medical situation, everything else looks okay. I'm like, you know what? I'll take a chance on that. That's totally fine. But that being said, with the securitization, if it's below whatever, they set whatever number they set it at, anything below that, they kick it out. like I say, they'll be kicking that out to somebody like me, where I can pick that up, and I'm willing to take that chance because I can look at that credit report fully instead of just one number. So, like I say, part of me is like, yeah, go for it. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I'll parrot that. Like, so in our business, when we're underwriting our rent to own buyers, we don't have a minimum credit score. We do look at their score, and we do take into account why it's low, right? It could be medical bills, could be divorce, a death in the family. You know, it's like I say, it's life happened to somebody, and their credit dropped because of something. You know, I've got somebody looking at rent to own with us right now, going through a divorce, chaos, was late on one payment, and the bank's not going to loan to them. So it's a business decision for us. Like, we don't have to check all the boxes that a lender does, but it was just one late because of that. And so for that reason, we'll say, okay.
So that sounds like a human element. Like the securitization is really interesting because it tries to package things in boxes for giant systems. And ultimately, why do we have these giant systems? Because the money is so good in billion and $10 billion packages. Like we've all had the experience of lenders that just don't want to play. And they go, I remember the cash flow was really good on buying houses in Alabama back in 20 years ago, but lenders are going, this is a $60,000 loan. No, we don't. I mean, lenders didn't want to play. They wanted to do the $600,000 loan. And then quite frankly, most lenders were like, I want a $6 million loan because it's very similar work. And so why does JP Morgan and Goldman and all these big banks, why do they want to be a part of these big things with the securitization? Why is this better for them? It's not better for society to do things where you just say, well, anybody with a pulse or not, we don't care. We're just going to have a name and a number and attach it. And it just comes down, it comes down to people profiting. And Nathan, you're right. This creates a lot of opportunity for guys like you, but it's really the ones that are going to really benefit. And one of the things that we heard back after, we've heard it for a long time about we should have more home ownership. I think under the Bush administration, when I was doing real estate starting out, there was a lot of push to increase the home ownership from whatever it was, 65% to 69% or something. And that incremental move was incredibly dangerous because there's a portion of the population that should not be trying to buy. They move too often. They're irrational. They don't hold jobs. Like there's a certain percentage of the population that it makes sense when you're pushing into a place where it's like the danger space. And I think what we're doing is we're saying, oh, that's okay. Like this is crazy to do a very similar thing and think that the consequences aren't going to be the same or potentially worse. But, people have very short-term memories and they say, oh, there's money to be made, so I don't really care what the consequences are. I'll get my money and then get out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see this again, it's repeat, man, we got short memories. This is, like you say, 20 years ago, all of a sudden this kind of thing, very similar, was a brand new idea. And it was like, oh, let's do this. And that turned out really well. And this is kind of the beginning of that all over again. And we're starting to see that. And like you say, James, I don't know if this actually has gone through yet or if it's going to. But yeah, there's a part of me that's like, okay, bring it on. And then people are turning to, lower credit scores. Again, it really goes down to the individual. Or is it low because? And like you said, James, you look at the report and why is it low? And I don't know that the banks are going to do that, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, ultimately, when we see this, that you play this thing out, and what happens? You have a government-backed entity like Fannie or Freddie or Sally or these different things. When things fail, what happens? Then the U.S. government backstops these things. And what happens? Do they go tax us more? No, but they print to cover it. And what happens? That means everybody's taxed more. And so we're all paying the price for these big systems. This is a redistribution of wealth from the bottom up, because the people that get hurt by the inflation the most are the ones on the bottom. The ones at the top are closest to the money printing. And so people should be outraged by stuff like this that's happening, because it's what people are pissed off about. We're going to talk about Mamdani, I think, next. And Why are people yelling? Why are they supporting? Because they're pissed off and they feel like they're being burned. They're not really sure why though. They think it's a Republican or a Democrat or somebody, but it's not. It's the monetary system, and the monetary system is literally feeding on the people, not the wealthiest. It's feeding on the people that are out there trying to survive, and that sucks.
Yeah, totally.
Said, well, let's talk about Mamdani from United States real estate investor. Mamdani's landlord government NYC investor killing blueprint is exposed. They talk about filmmaker and entrepreneur John Popola kind of calling this out. I'm not familiar with his name. Are you guys?
Uh-uh.
Yeah.
No, I don't know him.
He's definitely pointing fingers. Because Mamdani's talking a lot of different things. Rent freezes, which, oh my God, we could go down a rabbit hole of that. Expanded public ownership and government control over housing. Sorry, I got distracted. Yeah.
This seems like a good idea. I mean, being serious, it actually does seem like a good idea to millions of people that are sitting there looking at this stuff going, I can't afford childcare. I can't afford to even take the bus. The groceries are too high. This is the solution. Now, it doesn't work, but it is going to get people to vote, and it did. And we're going to see more and more of that because people they're going backwards. And the problem with this idea that the economy is getting better, it is for a very narrow set of the population, but for most people, they're going backwards. And the efficiencies are not helping them. The efficiencies are helping people that own shares, and they have portfolios of companies that are being more efficient. They're AIing and outsourcing and cutting. They're being more profitable. That's screwing people over because they're not adapting to this. And what happens? Mamdani happens. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. This is happening so fast. We were talking about the data centers and the AI and everything. It's happening incredibly fast. Like I just had a narrowing of my organization down where several of my companies we dropped 70% of our people over a period of about a year. And so you can imagine the payroll that dropped, and we're producing a very, very similar revenue. Well, I'm not the only one that's doing that. We're seeing the efficiencies, and it used to be people are like, well, I'll just get another job. And things have switched where people are saying, I want to try to keep my job now and not maybe be so flippant about leaving, but they're still struggling. It doesn't matter if there's a new poverty number that I was reading in an article recently. It's not 30 or 40,000 where you're in poverty. For a family of four, it's 140,000. And that's because as you make more and more money, you lose these social safety nets. You end up having to have childcare, which these things chew up the second person's income. And so Mamdani I think that's a canary in the coal mine. We're going to see more of that. And we're not addressing, you can't just give free stuff because you're redistributing. Okay. But there's also a part where people are going to it's going to be pitchforks. And I think we've been talking about that a long time. But when you have somebody that's an avowed socialist communist that wants to do things completely different, I think we've hit that threshold where it's not just chatter. It's not just irritation. Like people are going to start putting people in power that have the ability to change society in a pretty significant way.
Great point.
Yeah. And like you started with, on the surface, this sounds like a great idea. And I can totally see that from the people who are struggling and are angry and are frustrated. I can 100% see from their perspective how this sounds like a really great idea. It's really not. It's really not a good idea. And for that, you have to take a step back and say, okay, what's the long-term view of this? How would this actually play out? Work it through, like not just this year, but over the next 5, 10, 20, 50 years. What is this actually going to turn into? And I can tell you, it's not a pretty picture. You've got landlords now that can't own this building. And then, so who's going to own that? Who's going to take care of it? Who's going to pay the property taxes? Like all of these things, it snowballs and snowballs and snowballs. And it's really not a good idea. Short term, maybe some relief. Long term, terrible idea.
What happened during the COVID fiasco? We had checks that were sent out, this trillions of dollars, and everybody thought, oh, I'm richer. And all the money ended up back in the same places. A lot of it back at Amazon and into shareholders. And then guess what? Everybody's all of a sudden, my eggs are at $8 or $12 or And people, they want the short term. They're a bunch of crackheads. I mean, the population, unfortunately, are crackheads. And and I say that because it's hand to mouth. It's like, I need the next hit of cash. People think cash is the solution, and it's actually the drug. It's the thing that's killing them, and they don't realize it. And so that's what they're going to do. They're going to say, we're going to reallocate things. We're going to remove the police, because then that'll solve the problem. It's like, no, it actually doesn't solve the problem when you do that, because then it's a free for all. I think, one of the things about New York, which kind of cracks me up, people think, oh, everybody's going to leave. Yeah. Some people are going to leave. Like Ken Griffin left Chicago. He said, I'm going to freaking Miami, or I'm going to Florida. And the richest guy, I think it was the richest guy in New Jersey a few years ago, left and went to Florida. And guess what happened? The state of New Jersey had to change their budget because he was such a big line item for them. They said, oh crap, we actually are going to have to reduce our spending. And so I think you are going to see people that say, we're going to move. You're not going to have Chase Bank that's going to move out of New York. But they are, they're going to Dallas. They're going to Florida in a big way. The Texas Stock Exchange that's going into a building where I have my office in Dallas, this capital and high, people are going to say, we just don't want to be in a place where we're going to get mugged, or potentially where they're going to rob us of our income. But at the same time, I think you're going to have a lot of people that are going to say, hey, I want to be in a place where I get all this free stuff. So I don't know that you're going to have a net population decrease. I think you may have an increase just of not the right people, no capital. Like, who the hell is going to bring capital to New York right now? Like, that seems like an insanity move. Like, why? No way. There's plenty of other places, and New York is going to fade. There are going to be other places that become the financial capitals, and unfortunately, this is sort of inevitable with how we've been printing money for the last 100 years.
And again, all it takes is just take 2 minutes to think this through a little bit more. So people are going to leave the state. The ones who are left are getting the free stuff paid for by the government. Okay, how are they going to keep that going? If the business isn't there, if the underlying infrastructure isn't there, it just collapses against itself. Like, it literally creates a much, much larger problem in a very short amount of time. And we're not even talking, 50 years down the road. We're talking like 2 or 3, maybe 5. Like, that's how fast it can turn, and it would just collapse so hard and so bad. Bad idea.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see if it keeps going this way.
Good luck.
Yeah. One other thing that's impacting all of these things that we're talking about, and you guys may know this, a lot of people have probably heard this stat, but with AI is doubling it's doubling in its capacity, its abilities every 3 to 3.5 months. And so when microprocessing technology has on average doubled every 18 months, you can see a curve, but this is happening so fast that by 2030, we're in 5 years, you're talking about 1 million times more powerful AI. What does that enable everything to do? Everything, between the soft stuff, whether it's just coding or video, even to the robots and the robotics that are being built by Elon and 1 million other companies at this point. So what are people going to do? And they're going to say, save me. And that's really, really dangerous. This is what happened back in Germany in the 20s, 30s, and 40s back, last century. And it turns into wars. And that's, unfortunately, wars do happen when people start starving. Yeah. It's just revolts happen. And there's going to be, as much as new jobs are being created, there's a lot of cool stuff. Medical things are going to be solved because of the computing power and the LLMs that are out there. But when people aren't, there's going to be a period, and I'm pretty nervous about it, quite frankly, especially in denser places. So it's kind of going back to the question about the scams that are out there. I don't know. The violence factor to me is a bigger danger when you're saying, okay, we're going to have more unemployed people, and we're going to take the police out of play, and then we're going to put policies in place where they're supposed to just do kumbaya, and people get out of prison because it's the right thing to do. So I think we need to be thinking, zooming out a little bit and asking the question, where do we want to have capital? Where do we want to be? And because these things are going to change, they're going to change faster than people realize. We don't really function exponentially, but this is happening exponentially. Like, we're biological. We're very linear. Things happen over hundreds of years to humans, but this is happening in hundreds of minutes and hours. Like, that's how fast this shit's happening.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We're on a wild ride, baby. Well, let's take a break to hear from one of our partners.
Are you worried about where your money's headed in today's unpredictable market? At Accelerated Capital, their investors tell them that safety and security are their highest priorities. They want to wake up every day knowing their hard-earned money is working hard for them. In the best interest of their investors, Accelerated Capital carefully vets every opportunity, knowing that most of their investors want to avoid risky strategies and stick with more boring but proven asset classes and strategies. Accelerated Capital's team of seasoned real estate experts and financial strategists value long-term relationships and transparency. They're also there to help investors find a fit for their own personal goals. Accelerated Capital has options for both accredited and non-accredited investors at any stage of their investing journey. Visit acceleratemycapital.com to download a free copy of The Astute Investor and join their Legacy Wealth Collective private investor club. Or click Schedule a Call to book a short Capital Accelerator call today. To get started, visit Accelerated Capital at acceleratemycapital.com. That's acceleratemycapital.com. Accelerated Capital. Accelerate your wealth with alternative investments.
Okay, let's get back to the news. From United States real estate investor, Trump's 50-year mortgage proposal shocks America's housing market.
Yeah.
Ooh-wee.
Again, it's one of those things where on the surface is like, oh wow, I can lower the payment, but then you start doing the math on that. It's not a good idea. Again, it's so short-sighted. Like you said, Damien, it's crack. They're thinking it's cash flow. Oh my goodness, no! That you are going to be paying out so much more. This is my bread and butter. This is what I do. So as an investor, a 50-year being paid for 50 years instead of 30, that sounds awesome.
Right.
At the same time, though, I actually have some reservations on that because when I'm buying a loan, I'm looking at risk management. So I buy it at a discount because I'm taking on risk for the next, 15, 20, 30 years. How do I know this person is going to keep paying for that long? When you stretch that out 20 additional years, man, so much can happen in 20 years, so much. And so I actually see that as a riskier loan to begin with. And it's not something I'm even comfortable looking at, not without a significant portion of a down payment. So they've got to have a bigger down payment up front. That's how I would look at it. And then for long-term, I have to be very well reassured that this person's going to be able to make payments for 50 years. Mm-hmm. And I had a hard time looking at that and saying, oh yeah, this is a good bet.
What's the average person, the average homeowner? They're in a house for 7 years like this. Yeah. It used to be 7 years. I don't know if it still is. From what this is to me, this is it's pretend home ownership, and it's so people can feel good about themselves. It's really just slavery. It's you don't have the flexibility of being a renter, but you have, and so you own this thing and you have responsibility for, and basically it's tying people down, and it creates more profitability for lenders. So there's maybe good lenders and bad lenders. We'll call Nathan a good lender, but the truth is this doesn't help. It helps the system pretend to help people by putting them in, allowing them to say, oh, I can afford more house. It will drive the house prices up. I mean, you do something like this because people will chase these things with limited supply and the shadow inventory that's floating out there by the Black Rocks and these different institutions that are gobbling things up. But I think this is a terrible idea. I didn't know about the 30-year Dodd-Frank issues where there's caps on things. When you think back the way things used to be, and I mean, it's funny that this word fascism is thrown around a lot, but fascism is literally like wanting to go back in time. That's part of the whole concept of it when you do the research on what it actually means. And there were things that were great 100 years ago. Sanitation probably wasn't one of them. So there's a lot of things that are better today. But when I look back, you look at the math, what were people doing? They were buying houses. They were buying them. They were not rent to owning them from a lender or the government. And things have radically changed where I don't know that we're necessarily this. A lot of times real estate doesn't really keep up when you actually add in all the math of doing everything. It basically just maybe keeps up with inflation for a lot of people. And then what's the big exit? You move into another house that's down the street and it's neutral. And so this just screws people again. It's a financial instrument that's not helping it's not helping society be more stable. We need the beauty of America is the middle class. Without the middle class, you don't have stability. You cannot have rich and poor like you have in places like Venezuela or a lot of places in the world. You need the middle class. It's what makes it really stable. this doesn't stabilize America. This actually takes us in the opposite direction. So I'm not a fan of this at all.
Yeah. And like you say, with Dodd-Frank, currently the law is no more than 30 years. So I really actually don't see this happening at all, because then they'd have to go in and change the law and all those things. Like it would be, it's a much bigger thing to take on than just saying, oh, by the way, now we're going to offer 50 years. It's far bigger than that. So I really don't see that happening. And then when you do the math, I was just looking at it earlier this morning, let's talk about a $350,000 loan. If you're going to take that from 30 years to 50 years, it's going to save you a little more than $200 a month. So, I mean, that's a savings. Don't get me wrong. $200 a month is not nothing. But over that same length, that mortgage, you're paying thousands and thousands of dollars more for that loan. And for the consumer, it's just not a good idea. It is slavery. It is long-term slavery that you're going to be stuck in for a long time.
It's funny. I agree with Dave Ramsey a little bit of the time. I think he's got a great idea around getting people out of debt. That's the wrong kind of debt, especially like rich people. Very rich people do not have mortgages on their primary residence. It's just not a thing. Like they own this stuff with the government, with their property taxes, but getting people out of debt, I think should be a primary. It's not the only thing, because where I agree and then end my agreement with Dave Ramsey is like, you don't have any financial skills. You kind of just say, okay, no debt. I'm going to live on rice and beans, and then I'm going to be debt free, but you don't really know what to do after that. And you're not really free financially. But this does take people in the wrong direction. That $200, people should be thinking about, instead of how do I make my mortgage $200 less, how do I add an extra $1,000 to pay down the mortgage so that it's accelerated? So it's a 7 or a 10-year plan instead of a 30 or a 50. But people are like, oh man, I want to spend $200 on goose shoes or whatever those things are with the little stars on the sneakers. Like, people are doing dumb. I look at a lot of my employees over the years, and I'm looking at their spending habits, and I'm thinking, you guys are screwed, because you're making choices. And what they don't want to do is do the thing that's the right thing, which is paying off the debt and building up investment portfolios. They want to look good to people that don't really care. Like, it's the craziest thing I've ever seen. But this is just allowing people to buy more of those goose shoes with 50-year mortgages if it ever got passed.
Totally. It goes back to COVID again. They were getting all this free money, and where did it go? Not back into their mortgage. Like you say, it went to Amazon, it went to some online retailer, and that's how they spent that money. So it would be the same thing. It's not going to help the homeowners at all. It's just not a good idea. And like I say, I don't think it's actually viable. I don't think that this is something that we're actually seriously entertaining. I would be shocked if this was something that got past the level of conversation it is today. The one, actually, I thought this would be kind of an interesting discussion with you guys. The one that is, I think is a little bit more viable. It is tricky still. There'd be a lot of kinks to work out, especially with securitizations, but the portable mortgages.
Yeah.
So in Canada, that is a thing, actually. So we moved from Montreal over to Calgary, and we were able to port our mortgage over and just basically change the collateral. So it was on our old house, and it's on our new house. We kept the same rate, which was fantastic because it was under 2%. And so we're happy about that. But we were able to port that over. That, I think, has a little bit more, it's got more legs. I think that's can be a lot more useful for people, because that's what we're seeing now is a lot of people are not selling because they feel trapped, because they don't want to go from a 2 or 3% rate up to 6 or 7, because that is a lot more than $200 when you look at it that way. So that I think has more potential, but again, it would take a lot to make that change.
And I think that works if you've got government backed or government sponsored type of debt. You're not going to have, there's no rational bank that is lending actual money, that they have at 2%,
right,
and they're upside down paying out 4%. They're going to want to get rid of that thing. They'd never agree to it, but it totally works with bureaucrats and governments that want to create, because it is cool. The idea of, of course, why do people not want to move? Because their mortgage on the new place is 3 times as much as the 2% that you've got. Yeah. And that's what people are stuck with, which will change to a certain degree next year with rates, at least in the US. But I think it's a cool concept. I think that in a free market, it wouldn't work when you have rates that are significantly higher than the rates that people have locked in, but it's great for the individual that has those loans. So, maybe this is where the hybrid of the government and the private market works. I don't know. Are you seeing, Nathan, that this is something that banks are doing, or just more of the government sponsored type of entities, the lenders? Like who's doing this? Who's allowing this?
So banks are doing it, but I need to add there's one more piece to the story here, because the way the mortgages are done in Canada is your loan is amortized over 30 years, but then you have a term. So basically a balloon. Almost everybody, probably 90% of people, take a 5-year balloon. So that's why it works in Canada, because you're porting your mortgage, but then there's always an end date, and it's going to be within the next couple of years. And then you're going to have to go back to the bank again, refinance at whatever the current rate is at that time. So you're never stuck with, or you never get to keep that awesome super rate that you got once, at the beginning of 2020. You're not going to keep that forever. We did. And now in January, we're up. And so now we're going from a less than 2% to about a 4.5% in Canada right now. So not awful, but it's more money every month. That's for sure.
Yeah. 2 to 4.5% for virtually everybody is a death blow, because they don't have like that. That is not a little, that is monumental disaster. So yeah.
But again, that's why that works in Canada, is because there is an automatic end date for that low term loan. Yeah.
That's interesting. I teach a continuing education class for agents about rent to own. And then a buddy of mine teaches more like Mortgage 101. And he always asks everybody in the class, like what is securing that what is a mortgage? And most people think, well, it's the house itself. And he's like, not really. It's actually just you as the buyer, your ability to pay. And so if that's truly the case, then it makes sense you take that loan with you, as long as that you can afford the new property, right? So it's kind of an interesting way to look at that. I was also going to point out too, like we talked, these 50-year loans, they're just going to be government-backed loans, FHA, VA, USDA, right? The other lenders probably aren't going to do this, or maybe they will, but it's up to them. It's not going to be government-backed. And then I was thinking, like, well, how does that as investors help us? Well, we can't as investors go get those loans unless we're house hacking, right? And so we do have 40-year loans available for investors and interest only. We have those kind of things that are already in place if you want to amortize out that far, right? So I don't know. What do you guys think about how does this affect us as investors? How can we take advantage of this? Is there an advantage?
From my side, I'm not going out and seeking these loans for myself. I'm buying somebody else's loan that they set up that is now 50 years. And so, like I say, for that long term, I'm going to make a lot more money. I don't think it's a fair loan for the homeowner, and so I would probably try to work with them and make that a shorter term, most likely.
Yeah, it's a win for a lender that gets a long-term predictable cash flow that's mostly interest for most of the time that they're going to have it, because people aren't going to have, I think, the idea of a 50-year, most people are going to be dead. So like the actuarial table will say that you will die before you pay this off if you're on this track. So it's really just enriching the lenders. And it's not the guys like Nathan, it's the guys it's the institutions that are going to just absolutely murder people. And that's who things are being written for. That's what this is all about. It's about these big institutions. How do they keep people trapped into paying forever? Why is everything on a monthly recurral renewing? Why is everything we do now a subscription? Yeah, it's like our houses. Our houses are basically just a giant subscription. We have fees that we pay until we die in these houses, and you can get rid of some of them, but you can't get rid of you cannot own your house. There is no place in America where you can own your house. And there's 7 places in the world that I'm aware of where there's no property taxes. You can sort of own the house, but I mean, in the U.S., unless you're on a native land, but you're not in the actual different sovereign nation, you are a renter. with the government. So I think we need to be a little bit more rational about what does it mean to even own a house. And people they have this pride of ownership. It's like, yeah, don't pay your property taxes. See who owns your house.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to point out too, this came up in conversation the other day. Somebody was talking about like being older and like just racking up credit card debt, buying homes, like they're never going to, collect that from them because they're going to end up dying. Well, I do have a buddy that recently bought a property outside the US, vacation home. And he was looking at putting a loan on it. And I don't know if they offered him a 40-year or 30 initially, but then it was like they realized he's 63. They're like, nope. Like he's going to have to do like a 15, I think, or something like that. He ended up cashing out some money and just bought it cash, but they weren't going to do that because, like you're talking, Damien, the actuarial tables, they're looking, oh, you're not going to live that long. We're not going to give you a 50-year loan. So.
And to play that out, what that would look like is, let's say somebody gets a 50-year loan when they're 50 years old, and then let's say they die at 85. So now there's 15 years left on that loan. What happens? Well, what happens is they've stopped paying on their mortgage, so now it goes to foreclosure. It goes through a foreclosure. It either gets bought at foreclosure or the bank takes it back. But in either case, that's how the bank gets paid off. The problem with that is they get cashed out for the full amount of whatever's left. But in their initial calculations, they were supposed to be paid for an additional 15 years, principal and interest. So they're missing out on all that interest for that last 15 years. And so again, I don't think this is really a viable thing that ever has any legs, because no bank's going to look at that and be like, oh yeah, we're fine with that. That the whole advantage of having that long term is payments for 50 years. If you get paid out early, well, that interest all of a sudden disappears. And so I on so many levels, I don't think this is going anywhere. I hope not. I don't think I keep saying this, but I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah. All right, let's stop beating the dead horse. No, this is good. This is a good conversation. Let's go to the next article from United States Real Estate Investor. California bombshell. Senate Bill 79, that's what SB stands for, right? To transform quiet blocks into 6-story battlefields. Hadn't thought about this till I started digging into it. It's actually called the Abundant and Affordable Homes Near Transit Act. So they're talking about building 6-story multifamily buildings within a half-mile from major transit stops, overriding traditional single-family R1 zoning. So this is an interesting one. You want to jump in, guys? You guys have such great comments on this stuff.
I mean, this is the 15-minute city. This is the entire plan. If you think about what we've been told for years in the last however many decades, it's about building places cities where everything is within 15 minutes, and so that's what you have to have denser and denser and denser spaces. And like when I moved to Austin a couple of years ago, I was there for a very, very brief period of time, and I was in a building and I realized, man, not only do I not have to leave my building because I can just bring things to me. If I wanted to leave, I could walk around and I could be within 10, 15 minutes and have access to everything. This is how you push a population if you're trying to both control it, and there's a lot of agendas here. There's so many factors that come into play though, because of digital technology and autonomous cars and things that are changing all of this. But and this works great for some people. Some people love it. They're like the New Yorkers that say, I love that I can just walk a block and be in 2,800 different restaurants, or there's things like that. The problem with places like, especially California, they have a very strange way of thinking that gravity doesn't apply to them, that they can just do things or force things. And, it doesn't matter that actual economics are in play. So anytime that they say this is a good idea, I just say, oh, that's another 10 or 20 or $50 billion that's going to be sucked out of the population, and it's going to be redistributed into who knows what their grandiose plan is for the next election cycle. I don't think anytime you try to do something and force land, if you could do it Like, and maybe they'll do it because they'll subsidize. But when you start trying to force things, developers are going to look at ways to make money. They're not going to do it just because California says you should do this. They're going to say, all right, if I'm making a ton of money, and how does that happen? I don't know. It doesn't work in California for building single family houses in general, for anything that's even remotely affordable, because everything is so, I mean, the land is so expensive, and the regulations are, one of the things I found out this year, I got really clear, regulations account for 25 to 30% of the cost of building a house. And so when you're dealing with that, people go, well, the interest rates are too high, or this is the problem, or materials. No, it's actually the damn government. Mm-hmm. And California is probably there in New York, probably the two worst. And so that's that, but we don't talk about that. We don't talk about how that needs to be stopped. Instead, we have guys like Gavin Newsom out there saying, oh, this is a great idea. Let's put more shit in the way of people actually progressing and building and bringing capital over there. And then they leave. They go to Austin or Dallas or somewhere else.
Yeah, I see this, and I understand what they're trying to do here. Like, I get it. It's very expensive, and land and buildings and everything else. It's really an expensive place to live. And so how do you create an environment where, there's a way to be able to afford housing and still live there and get everything done with the current situation? And I think probably part of that is the current situation. As there has to be a ceiling to anything you're doing. So if we're looking at current situation, is everything's super expensive. We all know, we've been around, all three of us here been around long enough. It does go in cycles. So I see this again as a kind of a short-term look. And this one's slightly better because I know they're trying to solve a long-term thing. And this has been an issue in California for a long time. However, building these kind of buildings close to transit, everything like that, it's going to, I'm afraid, backfire, where part of the charm and part of what makes California so attractive is the ambiance, what the neighborhoods look like, how they feel, and that kind of thing. And the more you try to cram people in there, I'm afraid that's just going to backfire and make it worse. I could be off on this, but I would say that by doing that, eventually you're going to lower the whole value of the whole neighborhood. And so I guess you're kind of solving the problem that way as well, if you want to look at it that way. But I see this as something that's going to really negatively impact neighborhoods, cities, everything long term.
Yeah. I was trying to think of the opportunity here. It seems like there's a window, and you see this happen where somebody goes in and buys up these little single family homes in that half-mile distance from where that might go. If you knew where that was going, you could be buying up some houses and then get bought out, right? But if you bought wrong and they built it here, and now you own this house next to this lower income building, then your value dropped, right? So that'd be a risky move, but I'm sure there's some people, especially people in the know, that hear from the government or the developers where they're buying what.
All you got to do is get a hold of Nancy Pelosi. She's really good at predicting everything that goes up. So if you just ask her, what should I should buy? I was thinking about this before we started this conversation. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out the short term, kind of going back to the short term versus long term, and they're getting in front of something. If you can get in front of the path of progress, you might get lucky, or you might nail it because of something like this. There's also ways to do this that are more fundamentally sound, like you see the macro path of progress that's moving along an interstate, that's moving and chewing up farmland, and you go buy something, but that's not usually an overnight thing. The problem is everybody's they're so short-sighted, and they're so impatient. And when you all the money I've made has been in long-term building things and being patient. And I'll tell you one thing, if you ever hear me saying, I'm going to time this thing because this thing is, just do the opposite and you will make money 100% of the time. It's a risk-free, guaranteed trade. I'm the world's worst trader. And I think people are trying to figure out, because they're back to desperate, or they just, they see all these people online that have all this wealth or success, the real estate investors that have made millions, and they go, I want that. And they say, well, if I can get the thing yeah, that's one way to do it. But like what does Warren Buffett say? He's had 12 good ideas in 60 years. And that's basically everything. It's not he had 12 ideas this year or this month. It was like one every 5 years was really a big idea. And if you're willing to put some time and effort, then that's the difference. Most people aren't. And so the few people that are willing to put the time and effort and be patient with being a farmer as opposed to a hunter, there's opportunities here. And so you could get lucky, but I think that there's more luck, or maybe you can get the poly market to help you figure out whether it's the right piece of land or not. I'm not a fan of trying to pick those things and speculate and make a quick kill. Not to say that people won't make money. I think that that's a dangerous route, and you're going to be wrong as much as you're going to be right or more. It's like going to Vegas. Like, you might be right a few times, but the house is going to win if you're gambling. And I think for this type of thing, it would be gambling from most people's perspective and how they operate in it.
Yeah, if you had some kind of local knowledge, some way of knowing, sure. And then, like you say, make a quick buck and then turn around and do something else maybe. But yeah, it's a lot of speculation, a lot of this might work.
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up, because that's something really important. A lot of people are just trying to bounce from one thing to the next. But sure. you look at families or people that have been in an area for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Their families are there. They know everything. They know everybody. There is a value in that. So getting entrenched in an area can be really helpful. You can get things done. You know who to talk to. And that's one of the things. I've been all over the place, and I have no leverage knowing people as deeply as people that have been around for a long time. So there is a value in that. It's a lot harder to do things when you're showing up, trying to do something. Like if you said, "Oh, I'm going to that area in California," and you weren't from there. Exactly, Nathan. That you're going to have no insight, and somebody might tell you something, but you don't know if it's bull. I mean, you just don't know, because you don't have the deeper long-term understanding.
Right. Yeah. So it could be a play for a quick something, but I don't know.
Some people have bigger appetites for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go to our next article from KITV Island News, Honolulu. Jury indicts 2 men accused of property scam targeting Oahu homeowners. They apparently, prosecutors say, these guys manipulated the Hawaii's Bureau of Conveyances to transfer ownership on paper and defrauding these homeowners. Multiple felony counts, including computer fraud, theft, attempted theft, insurance fraud, and forgery. It's like they threw the book at them. So, kind of similar to that last article. What were you going to say, Damien?
No, there's the never-ending supply of creative criminals. There was a famous robber. They said, "Why do you keep going to the bank and robbing the banks over and over again?" He goes, "That's where the money is." And where's the money? In something where you can do some digital stuff. And there's probably a dark web version of Upwork for this type of stuff where you outsource your criminal activity. This is not meant to be a brainstorming session on criminal activity, but just saying, there's probably syndicates of people. It's like, I have mills of people, so I'm the mastermind, and I'm going to go and, people are going to do all these things for me, and they're going to be in some type of sweat room, or whatever they call these things around the world. And they're not the people in, I suspect that in a lot of these places, they're not the masterminds. There's somebody else that's driving the people to do the things. It's like the bot farms, like when you have all these people that have thousands of phones that are sending out, they're dominating social networks. But you cannot overestimate how bad this can be. And you probably are underestimating how much you should do to prevent it. One of the things that I realized more and more over the years is that most people, including me, were way underinsured. Things like cyber security or cyber insurance, like just all these things. And people are like, "Oh, I have insurance." And I'm like, you don't have nearly enough. You have no idea until you get sued or somebody tries to steal something, how exposed you are. People are just, because they think, "Oh, I'm just wasting money." And it's not true. You almost can't buy enough insurance. If you can get it, you should get it. And that's a takeaway for freaking everybody. I mean, unless you're on food stamps or homeless, you really are probably underinsured. And you'll be thankful in the moment when you actually need something, car crash, sued, whatever. or somebody steals your house because they forged a document. Those are the things where it's nice to have millions and millions of dollars in lawyers and insurance companies going on your behalf, attacking whatever that adversary is.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of those ones where I look at this and I say, well, on the one hand, man, I got to hand it to these guys for thinking big, like good on you. But at the same time, I look at that and I say, I don't know how they thought this was going to play out. Like, how did they think they were going to get away with deed forgery? Like that's something that is going to be very easy to track. I think from my own experience anyway, like it's not very hard to look at a string of deeds and say it went from this to this to this to this and look at the ownership. And it's going to pop up pretty easy. I can pull a title search, for $20 and go and see who's on deeds and that total transfer of ownership. And so it's going to be pretty easy to catch them. So I'm curious how they thought this was going to go. And again, like it's not a brainstorming section. I'm just curious, like, did they think they were going to be able to do this long term, or is it just like a one and done and make your money and then go to the mainland and disappear? I don't know, but
great
good
question.
job for thinking big, though, I guess.
Yeah. And part of the criminal psychology, when you look at whether it's mass murderers, why didn't they just kill somebody or 5 people and stop? Because what else are they going to do? That's how they're wired. They're going to keep going. So people will keep doing these things until they get stopped. And and it might be that somebody gets stopped, but it's somebody that works for somebody that's thinking about it, and then they just pivot. So these type of situations are going to probably become more and more common. Back to hey, get in front of it. Think about this. Have people that are challenging what you've got set up. And are you actually protected? Do you have moats? Do you have alligators? Do you have guards? Like what do you have? Or are you just a sitting duck? I think most people are probably sitting ducks and they don't even realize it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in this case, I mean, bare minimum, get yourself some title insurance so that when you buy that property or sell that property, that you've got the insurance that's going to help do that, to your point there, because it exists. So you might as well do it. And hopefully everyone's doing that.
Well, I had a client, I was doing some coaching years ago, and they were excited about investing in real estate. So they went and bought a property in Florida, and I think they had a couple $1 million that they were working with. So they went and bought this property, and they were all excited. They were remodeling it, and it was probably like $600,000 or something. And I remember there was a hurricane that was coming through, and I reached out to him. I said, hey, I think the house you got is in the path of the hurricane that's coming through this, like in the next few days. And they said, oh, and I said, who's your insurance carrier? And they said, what do you mean? We didn't get insurance because they didn't have a mortgage that forced them to. And I laughed and I went, God, this is why most people absolutely, when they think, oh, I don't want to go have masterminds or coaches, they get obliterated because they make one mistake that wipes them out. They got very lucky. There was some damage, but the house didn't get blown over. But imagine that you buy a house and you've always had a mortgage. The one time you don't, you think I've made it, and then that thing is taken away. It was like 6 months after they bought it. And so it's not thinking about those things or having somebody, most people don't think about that stuff when they close on, but somebody tells them you have to do this or we're not giving you a loan. So you don't have a choice. When it's all cash, you have all sorts of choices. You don't have to pay your property taxes. Nobody's escrowing or impounding insurance, like all these things. And lots of ways to get hammered to death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, our next article from WTOC 11, Savannah, Richmond. It's a mouthful. Richmond Hill real estate fraud leads to $1.1 million cryptocurrency seizure. The feds seized more than 1.18 million in cryptocurrency. This is interesting for me. So they were targeting real estate agents in Georgia and North Carolina. They actually tracked down like $100 million in laundered transactions. They got one out of the 100, but at least they're putting in some effort. So, I do have something to say on it, but go ahead.
No, this is something it's interesting with the cryptocurrency stuff. There's more fraud, there's more criminal activity with fiat and gold than there is in crypto. It's kind of funny, but it's getting faster and more prevalent. So you're just going to see it. I mean, if it hadn't happened to you yet, there's something that's you're going to bump into. Somebody's going to say, hey, we're going to shut down your data system unless your data center, we're going to shut it down unless you give us $10 million in Bitcoin or Monero or something. This is not surprising. This is happening constantly. And one of the things that, like, we're in a bull slowdown market in crypto, but I watch people that get excited about the next thing. We've been talking about it with real estate, but they go, oh, easy, fast money. If I just buy this altcoin, or if I just do this thing, there's a theme that it's coming up over and over, and it's that speed kills. And people that are doing things, they think they can cheat, and you might cheat for a little while, but eventually you get caught. And then the consequences, the question is, are you willing to deal with the consequences? And most people don't think that far. They're very short-term thinkers. So this is a massive thing that's going to keep expanding in terms of the crypto space, and it's getting more and more entangled into real estate. There's a lot of crypto real estate funds that are happening, and people need to slow the hell down, is what I'm going to say. Like, I think people need to be a little bit more conscious and ask questions instead of just saying, "Yeah, cool, quick money, let's go."
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree, and I haven't done anything with crypto. That's not something, an area of my expertise. It's not something I have the time or energy to research, so I've stayed out of it. It's been interesting, though, in that same vein. I've talked to a couple of different groups over the last couple of years where they're talking about having mortgages on blockchain, where then you can sell a piece of that mortgage through blockchain out to investors. And again, on the surface, that sounds really great, and I can see all kind of holes in it. But as much as that sounds like cool and it could be a good idea, I don't see it going anywhere. Certainly no time soon. I don't think that that's something we're going to see anytime soon. But it's an interesting concept. I like the idea. I just don't see it happening.
There's a hint about what's coming when you see institutions pouring tons and tons of money into the infrastructure build out. Yeah. Goldman, JP Morgan, Chase, like all these things that are these institutions are pouring billions of dollars into setting up the infrastructure for blockchain, for tokenizing, for all these things. They're not doing that because they think it's cool. They're doing it because they're going to make a ton of money on it. So my thinking is actually the opposite of that. And it's just because I'm watching the money that's going into it, and having been through all sorts of interesting adventures in that space, one of the benefits of tokenizing mortgages, property, watches, like all these different things, is that you take out all of the fat in the transactions. When you have crypto, you think about moving money across borders. It's freaking crazy how much waste there is. But what is it? It's just middlemen that are squeezing bank fees, Visa, MasterCard, 3%. Seriously? Like, a lot of businesses, their margins are single digits, and half of their margin goes to Visa. I mean, this is insanity. So with the tokenization of things, it does allow people to participate, and it takes a lot of this junk that's just pulled out by all the, like, you don't need a lot of the insurances that are in place aren't going to be needed if you've got transparency and openness on a blockchain that's decentralized, because you don't have gatekeepers. Gatekeepers are expensive, and they suck, because I mean, what happened with people that had different opinions, whether it was politically or it was about crypto, these institutions can just say, oh, we're debanking you. I mean, like, that kind of stuff happens. So I'm not only a fan of it, I think that it's happening, and I just watch the money. Where's the money flowing? And these institutions. So I think that they're probably doing what you say you don't think it's going to happen. I mean, I don't know why they're spending tens of billions of dollars if it's not going to happen. That's probably what they're doing it because they want to control it.
Yeah, I'd be fascinated to see where it goes. I like the concept of it. I understand where they're going with it. I just see there's a lot of, red tape at the very least that needs to get around, and different things that they're going to have to figure out. But we'll see. It'll be interesting. And if it does happen, and it happens sometime soon, I'm all in. I think that's a great concept, and I'd be in for that. So we'll see.
When you guys have probably seen some of the, I don't know what these platforms are, but I've bumped into them where you can buy chunks of debt. You can buy, $100 worth of debt, and you can cut it up to 10 different loans, and you're getting little micro pieces. That's basically tokenization of the debt, the mortgages, or whatever we're talking about. So just putting that into a blockchain system is not much of a leap. It's the same thing. So it's already being done where people can have pieces. This just takes out, it streamlines a lot of the waste. And so instead of an investor getting 8%, maybe they get 8.5% because that other half was going to go to an institution or a title company or whatever. That's good for the investor. It's good for the people. I like that. It's more efficient. And so I actually don't see the downside unless you're the middleman that's getting wiped out.
No, for sure. I think one of the biggest things that needs to change currently is the rules around securitization and what you're actually selling. And that's what I see as the biggest hurdle to overcome. Not insurmountable at all, but that's the biggest one currently that they're going to have to figure out. Like how do you get around the definition of selling a security right now? How do you get around that so you can make this something that can actually go somewhere?
There's also a lot of there's support. The gal that's running the SEC now, there is a big shift from the previous SEC commissioner in the US that we now have a lot more support on opening access to all sorts of things for people to do that it was being resisted. It was being crushed. And there's an interest in having things available to people a lot easier. So securitization and what it is to sell securities or to change some of those rules and make it not as hard, because it's one of the frustrating things for people. Like if you don't meet those qualifications, you just don't see a lot of the things. And yeah, granted, a lot of the things can help you lose your money very quickly, as most things can. But we've all seen in the last 2-3 years, a lot of people that were accredited making their $200,000-300,000 a year, have their $1 million too, and they got excited. They started doing deals. They ended up getting hammered because they had amateurs running deals and they said, I've heard this a bunch this year. Wish I just kept all my money in the stock market. And I'm like, well, it could have crashed too. But I see both sides of this because I've seen so many people, and not just bad deals, but like criminal deals, Ponzi schemes, a ton, billions of dollars that I know of in my circle of people that I watch and listen to that tell me about their stuff. And so I also think that if you lock people down and say you're not allowed to do these things, that's bad as well. So, but we've got to also make sure that people are forced into self-responsibility. If you're going to do this, you don't get to sue people just because the deal collapsed or something. Like you've got to own your responsibility. That's one of the problems. A lot of people are like, oh, it happened to me, I'm the victim. And that bugs me a lot.
No, I totally agree. And that right now with the rules, with the accredited, you make a certain amount of money, not automatically you're accredited. Oh man, that's crazy. Just because you make money doesn't mean that you know what you're doing or that you know anything about investments or anything like that. On the flip side, I know people that are making $100,000 that are far more knowledgeable and far more savvy when it comes to picking out correct investments and due diligence on all those different things. So I'd love to see that definition change, and I hope that happens soon. We'll see.
I actually find that one of the experiences over the last 25 years was that a lot of medical docs, practices or practitioners that made $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year, there was an arrogance around, well, I have this education, not in money, but in their space, and I make a bunch of money. So therefore I must be superhuman and able to make really good investment decisions. They were the ones that lost their money the fastest because they thought that it was a weird like God complex with a lot of them. And I'm not saying all docs are like that, but I've seen enough of it where there was a theme, and it made me nervous because they tended to think, oh, what could go wrong? And then they blamed other people. And I'm like, this is not how this works, but it is how it was working or not working. So I agree with you. There's this idea that you make a certain amount of money, it qualifies you. No, it qualifies you to be able to lose it and not starve to death. That's the only thing it qualifies. That's the reason it was put in place, because it won't hurt you if you get hammered by what happens a lot. Private deals are not sanitized. Public market deals are sanitized to the point of the juice is gone. So there's a risk factor, and they want to make sure that you can live another day after you get wiped out.
Yeah, I would love to see that change. So if there's some way to support that, I'm in.
Totally. I wanted to share, so related to this article with the crypto, so they were targeting realtors, right? So I'm a realtor. I've had 2 buyers reach out to me just kind of out of the blue, which doesn't normally happen. Hey, can you help me out? That doesn't normally happen. But I had these 2 different buyers, very similar stories. Both of them had American sounding names, John, whatever. I'd get them on the phone. Hey, you sound like you're from India, right? I'm like, give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they've moved here or whatever, and they've changed their name. Sure. So kind of get into it. One of them immediately starts talking about cryptocurrency. I'm like, oh, here we go. Like a red flag. The other guy didn't really like hammer on that as much, but they both had similar stories. Oh, I'm moving to Colorado from out of state, can't meet with you in person, moving to Colorado, and I bring in my elderly mother or father and a child or two, and the parent has to be close to a hospital. Like they were very similar kind of stories. And also when I was like, well, what kind of a home are you looking for? It's like they weren't giving me the info right away. And then when pressed, like one guy's like, yeah, somewhere like 4 million. The other guy was 2 to 4. I'm like, okay, those are pretty high prices. And so I kept doing a little due diligence. Like I'd run them through the Forewarn app, which we get through NAR, I think it is, just to run background checks on people. They didn't pop up, of course, I run them through True People Search. I use that too for free to kind of skip trace people. They weren't there. Then I had a third one after I just ghosted these guys. I'm like, they're scammers, right? But then I had a third one recently where I was kind of suspicious. It's like, I live in California, I want to move out there. And what I did, I was like, take a selfie, like now, so he couldn't like doctor anything. Take a selfie holding up your California driver's license so I could see it was the same person. Mm-hmm. But it was. But I just had a weird feeling about him. But then I saw him like looking at homes after I'd kind of like dropped communication with him. And I reached back out. I was like, hey, I thought you might be a scammer. Like, he's like, nope. He's like, I already went with a different realtor. I'm like, he still could have been a scammer. But anyway, man, you got to be careful about these people.
It's tricky. I've had that same phone call with the guy. All of a sudden he's got this accent. I'm like, that doesn't sound like the name that you told me. Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
There's a concept called drawdown, and it's typical when people are trading stocks. But when you're doing deals, if you lose 50% of your thing, you do a couple of deals and one of them goes bad, you now have to make 100% of your money to even break even. And people don't think about this. They don't realize there's something called position sizing, and where you have what you can lose. And people tend to be completely insane about what they put down. They put everything on red or black. Like they think everything is. They need to do that again because it's too fast. People want all their stuff. They're impatient, greedy, lazy. This is just society in general. It is what it is. And so thinking about that, what would it be like? Like, how often are you going to make 100% on your money? You're not. Mm-hmm. But that's what you have to do to break even when you make one bad decision. So James, you're bad person. Like, what's the potential that you get scammed and you have to write a check for something? And then how many deals do you have to do to make up for that? You're like, okay, I got to do 10 deals to have one deal go wrong where somebody sues me or somebody steals from me or whatever. And so and this isn't meant to be just completely pessimistic about the entire world, except it is. You need to be. There's a great book called Thinking for a Change, and there's all these different types of thinking. There's pessimistic thinking, optimistic. There's pragmatic, and I used to be Mr. Optimistic, and then I got the hell beat out of me, and I was like, maybe I should have some pessimistic. So I got really pessimistic, and then it was like the sky is falling all the time. And then I did more pragmatic, and then I started realizing I need to have all these thinkings happening at the same time, which is a lot harder. And so you need to be optimistic and pessimistic and realistic about the reality of where people are and what they're doing. And people are doing what's in their best interest. If you think they're doing what's in your best interest, her name is your mom. That's it. Beyond that, people are doing what's in their best interest. And understanding that they have their needs. And it's like, I went to Africa a number of years ago on safari, found out that there were poachers that were killing these rhinoceroses. They would kill them and they would take their horn, and it would end up in Asia as a medicinal thing for bigger wieners. Like it was the ultimate Cialis. And I was like, okay, that sucks. Like, this is terrible. And then I thought, why are they doing this? They're making $100 on these horns, and the horns are worth like 500,000 when they get to the end. They were doing it because it was feeding their families. So I'm pissed at the poachers, but it's in their self-interest. Like, it's survival for their families.
Yep.
So when you think about it from that perspective, you say, okay, well, can't be mad at somebody trying to survive and protect their family. And I think that that's just one way to say, okay, this is happening. I'm going to acknowledge it. And then I'm going to think about how I don't have to draw down 50% because some jackass is trying to feed his family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff, guys.
Well said.
Well, let's take a break to hear from our next partner. Yeah.
Are you looking to elevate your business through exceptional content? Universe Media Publishing is your gateway to success. We understand that in the world of business, content is king, but not just any content. Your business deserves content that captivates, convinces, and converts your audience into clients. At Universe Media Publishing, we specialize in crafting SEO-rich web content, persuasive copywriting, and marketing copy that resonates with your audience. We don't just write, we engage, we connect, and we deliver results. Imagine your brand's voice amplified, your message crystal clear, and your presence dominating the digital landscape. That's the power of partnering with Universe Media Publishing. Don't let your business just blend in. Stand out, be heard, and make an impact. Connect with us at Universe Media Publishing, and let's turn your vision into reality. Visit universemediapublishing.com today. Your story, our expertise. Together, we'll create magic.
Okie dokie. Back to the show from United States real estate investor. Rotting in mold, the health scourge of U.S. corporate landlord neglect. Is my video glitching on you guys, by the way? No, just me. I've got 100 tabs open. So it's dragging for me. Anyway, so they're talking about corporate landlord neglect, triggering all these issues with neglecting these different properties, mold and moisture damage, structural decay popping up. So let's see, where do we go from here?
The problem is getting bigger. That's where we're going from here. This problem is going to be more and more of a problem. And it's not just because mold is getting more, it's because people are finding more and more ways to litigate and sue and try to get the quick fix, the quick kill. And people are trying to squeeze, with things getting more expensive, insurance getting more expensive, property taxes getting more, rents aren't going up as much as these other things are going today. They're not in general. So what's going to happen? People are going to cut corners. So this is dangerous as a person living somewhere or an office, in an office environment. So it's not. I'm not very optimistic about this getting better. I think this is going to become a bigger problem for everybody involved.
Yeah, as Antonio, our producer, pointed out, China's buying more U.S. properties. They probably don't, care about the residents and the properties. And these damn Canadians buying here.
I know. Sure. I can see this one kind of from both sides, because on the one hand, I mean, human decency. It has to be, it has to be in a type of a level of habitability where somebody can actually live there and not get sick from living there. That being said, how are the people living in the house actually taking care of it? That apartment, are they, storing wet rags in the corner? Well, yeah, that's going to make mold, and what are the other situations? So I look at this from both sides of it, where from the corporate side, for sure, they need to be doing this and taking care of whatever problems are there. At the same time, the people who are living in the property, are they being responsible enough to prevent those kinds of conditions from happening? And then when they're reporting back and they say, I have mold, we're like, okay, where did it come from? How did it get there? Is this because the window is leaking, or is this because you put all your wet junk in the room and close the door and turn on the heater? Where did it come from? And so it has to, I feel like there's more to this picture here, and I'd like to see the bigger picture to see. So both sides here, are you just being neglectful as the homeowner, or as the tenant, or are you actually being neglectful as the corporate owner. And so there's going to be a middle ground there, I think.
As a landlord and a tenant over the years, I think I have a different, my perspective now is I want to know more information before I get into bed with anybody, especially as a tenant. I want to know, how tight is this landlord? Are they going to resist every possible thing? Are they going to take care of this building because they have low leverage and they're not getting eaten alive by their debt? Most of what people are doing going into real estate, they're trying to figure out how much real estate they can get with. I don't see people saying, I'm going to spend the next 10 years saving up capital to go have a very low loan to value type of deal. And so if I'm thinking about being in a space, I want to know, is this person going to lose this thing? And am I going to be landlorded by a bank here in a minute? Are they going to actually take care of things that are a problem? Is it going to be a fight all the time? And it goes back to this whole speed thing. If you've got really good investors, owners of properties, they aren't leveraged to the hilt. They actually have the ability and they've budgeted in all these things. And but people aren't doing that. There's especially amateurs. And I was one of them. I mean, I was doing things 95 to 100% leverage or 110% leverage. That was how I did things for 5 years. I don't know how I survived. I guess I just ground myself into a pulp and worked really, really hard to offset the lack of capital for management or for other people. I just did everything. That's not really a great plan, and it's not really sustainable. And quite frankly, well, most people, it's a terrible idea if they thought about it. So part of avoiding this whole thing is having better investors, with better structures for their capital stack and how they're going to make sure they have reserves for things. And then if you're going to be a tenant, actually finding that out, like how leveraged is this thing? If I come to you with something, and I don't know how you find that other than maybe you figure out how much debt is on something and try to figure out the margin. If somebody has a tight margin, it gets very dangerous because these things get dignity be damned. If you have no money, you can't do anything. And that becomes a huge problem and probably an insurmountable problem.
Yeah. And as a tenant, if you can look and see, like, if there's some way of finding out what the record is for fixing things or for taking care of issues in the property, things like that. Social media does that to a point. On the other hand, the social media tends to be a whole lot of complaining. And so it's hard to filter out, what's actual real versus just somebody's mad at the world and wants to vent. And again, like, what's the level? So if you say I have mold, okay, are we talking the size of a grapefruit type of a little spot right there? Or are we talking like it's all over the wall? Anytime I'm talking to even realtors, when I'm saying, so, can you tell me about the condition of this property that I'm looking at? They say, oh, it's in terrible shape. Man, that doesn't tell me anything. Your version of terrible shape might be, beautiful, but it's got this one broken window or something like that. Like it can be all over the map. So you need the specifics. So if we could really do that on both sides with both the landlords and with the tenants, if everybody could actually be factual, and that would solve a lot of problems. But it's tough to get there.
Yeah.
I had a house that I rented about, I want to say 6 years ago. I think it was in fall of 19. And I remember moving into this thing and I was excited. It was in a really nice part of Phoenix by the Biltmore area. And I move in, all my stuff gets moved in, and I was working out of the house, had an assistant, and she comes over the next day and she's working, and then she feels really bad. And I was like, oh, you getting the flu or something? She's like, I don't know. And I think she came back the next day and she just was feeling terrible. And so I hadn't really investigated a whole lot. It was kind of a rush move. I was excited, lease ended. And I start poking around and I look underneath the cabinets in the kitchen and it was absolutely just black everywhere. It turns out they had a flood and they didn't remediate it. And so there was massive mold, and where my assistant was sitting was literally right next to the kitchen. So she's getting pummeled with all these spores. And I slept at that place, I think just one night, and I called the movers and I said, we're out of here. And I mean, that was, the landlord knew. They knew they had a problem and their property manager knew they needed to do it, but they just thought somehow they can get away with it because a lot of people will tolerate that stuff. And, they probably didn't have the money or they were just cheap bastards. And there's, either one is a problem. And so modeling things and making sure that you're not putting yourself so thin that you put everybody in, including yourself, because you can say, well, I'm not going to spend the money on it, but then you get sued and you spend the money on the attorneys. So it's like, how are you really benefiting yourself? And it's just because people are going too fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
let's keep things moving from United States real estate investors taking over America's heartland, homeowners getting crushed. It says nearly 1/4 of home purchases in key heartland metros are owned by corporations or investors. They kind of lump everybody, in there. What else was it saying? Actually, institutional ownership has doubled since 2019. That's a big trend, right?
Is it BlackRock or Blackstone, the one that's buying tens of thousands of these properties, and they basically have unlimited supply of really, really inexpensive capital?
Yeah,
and so
it's kind of interesting. Well, just to BlackRock, so Home Partners of America, the biggest rent-to-own company in America, was funded by BlackRock. That was the fund behind them. And they bought up a lot of properties and then sold them on lease options. But they just pulled out of the market at the beginning of the year. So, and I know they're fire sailing a lot of these properties. I wish I had, behind the scenes info on like why they totally pulled out. Because it's not like they just stopped buying. Like they're just, we're done. Part of it may be there's a class action lawsuit against them right now. So they might have been like, this is too much of a headache, And part of that is, and I talk about this in my class for realtors, they did their due diligence on the buyers and then bought these homes, and they put people into properties that may or may not have been able to buy because they had their layer of screening, but they weren't working with a lender, which is what we do. Get with a lender, an RMLO, have them go through the process and find out, why they can't qualify and the likelihood that they can buy in the future. So that's our process. That wasn't there. So I kind of wonder if that's why they pulled out. So.
Yeah. So years ago, there was Vision was another one of these companies that did the same kind of thing, bought up a ton of property and did lease options. There's another one too that they did it with land contracts and contracts for deed all over the country. And it's the same thing. They operated for a few years and then they ended up pulling out because of class action lawsuits and which were, from what I can tell, well-founded. I bought some of these properties and some of these lease options and contracts and things. Yeah, the houses were really rough. They left them in terrible condition. And so people were really upset about that. They didn't get what they were promised and all those kind of things. And so it's not the first time, but it's interesting. There's still a market for it. If these companies keep coming out of the woodwork and start buying these properties and selling lease option contracts, there's got to be a market for it. So if we can do it correctly, I think there's still a lot of money made there.
Yeah, that's my mission.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Damien.
Now, I think about the impact of these big institutions on. There's a microcosm of that in Sedona here in Arizona, where you've got investors that come in and there's unlimited amounts of, like, there's no limit on how many Airbnbs can be created. And one of the impacts on that is you don't have a community anymore. You literally mostly have transient, and there's a benefit for real estate agents. There's a benefit for the economic environment with more tax dollars because sales tax and things. But when you allow, especially a giant, it's one thing to have an investor that comes over and says, okay, I've got California money. I'm going to go and buy some big properties here, and I'm going to make the working class houses unaffordable because we're going to pump them up and turn them into rentals, daily rentals. It's different when you've got trillion-dollar institutions that have a direct line to effectively free money, and they're making decisions that impact people because we're playing by two different sets of rules. And so there's some chatter in Congress about creating some rules about limiting these, if you're over $500 billion, that kind of thing, where you can't buy more than whatever. I think it's worth the conversation, because I think these things do have an impact, and there's some pretty negative things. Sometimes the market corrects itself, but we've seen such a massive rise in housing prices. I don't think that it's necessarily helpful to have BlackRock or Blackstone taking positions of hundreds of billions of dollars in single family houses. Just probably not healthy for society.
Yeah. This is why I love the rent to own investing. We're investing medium term, 1 to 3 years up to like 10, but kind of the medium term. We're making money, but we're actually helping people become homeowners. We're not locking up this inventory and limiting the amount of homeowners that can potentially become homeowners. If we held longer term, would be part of this problem, not institutional level, but the other thing, we're into co-living investing, renting by the room. Mm. I like that too. Sure, it's taking a property that a single family could move into, but we're providing really necessary affordable housing to individuals that they can't go afford a 1-bedroom apartment or a studio apartment. And so we're giving them an option that they can afford. In fact, I've had 2 different people that were living in their cars. They could afford a car, and they were living, one of them, it was getting down to like -7 Fahrenheit, Nathan, not Celsius.
That's cold.
It's cold. Oh yeah. She calls me. She's like, "Can I get in, early?" And it was vacant. We had the room vacant. I'm like, "Yeah, I can get you in there." Like, you don't need to spend another night in your car. So I love that we're helping those kinds of people. So,
yeah. And part of it, I think, is some of these bigger companies come in, they buy, $500 million worth of property. It's just too big. And you lose that human element. Like, they're not going to pay attention to that lady who's living in a car. It's just get it done, numbers, and it just keeps on rolling. So you miss that human element where it's like, no, we're actually here trying to help people on the ground who actually need the help.
Yeah. Let's go to our next article. United States Real Estate Investor. Toxic Los Angeles. Investor abandonment faster than ever. Talking about rising regulations, eviction freezes, worsening crime, broken permitting systems. All these things like affecting investors.
Yeah, the big bad investors.
Yeah.
and I get it. Again, we're trying to make things good and safe and proper for everybody. But in the process, sometimes it comes down so heavy-handed that it ends up driving investors away. And again, that's not good for the overall economic situation there, for being able to take care of these houses, for being able to provide housing for people that wouldn't normally have the opportunity. All these things go away because government has stepped in and made it so difficult to get anything done that they're like, you know what, I'm out, and they'll go somewhere else and help solve problems somewhere else.
Yeah.
When I see people saying, "Oh, it's juicy," it's Los Angeles, and sometimes they live there. There's a quote by somebody I used to work with that said, "It's not, basically, it's not about investing where you live or where it's cool. It's where the numbers make sense." And the challenge that I have, and people have made a lot of money with the spikes in California's property prices, and it's the cash flowing in California is virtually non-existent. I mean, it doesn't really work the way that it should, and it's just rents aren't commensurate with the prices of a lot of properties. Mm-hmm. But I think what people tend to do is they go, "Ooh, here it's very sexy." And investing shouldn't necessarily be sexy. There should be other things in your life that are sexy. And when this is the sexiest thing you got going, you're about to have an event. It's called a very expensive seminar. Probably going to get a PhD in stupidity, just because there's ego and there's greed, and look, we all have egos. We're all greedy, but we lose our minds. We become these like reptilian primal beings where we're just chasing these things. And I think that's happening where people ignore things like rent controls and eviction freezes and the permitting issue after the Palisades, these fires that have happened in California. And people are sitting there staring, going, when can we build? And the permitting process is taking forever. Why would you want to go into that? Because the property goes up by 2 or 3x. There is a limit to that. And we've seen it. These swings, they don't just go up really, really aggressively. They go down really aggressively. We just haven't had that because the artificial stimulus that's been going on with all these dollars that have been printed for quite a long time. Yeah. This does catch up with people, but we're back to the impatient, greedy, lazy. Like I like the places where it is stable, where you can see long-term trends, where capital is respected. You can't have something that continues to work when capital is beaten to death. And that's what these places think that they can do. And eventually it gives way. Like they think, oh yeah, socialism will work. Yeah, until all the capital leaves. Then what?
Exactly. And it goes back to that same thing. Well, the government's going to pay for this, government's going to pay for that. Okay, and then what? Where's the government get their money? Will they get it from investors, people who are coming in and making money and driving the economy? So as you're driving those people out, that government money is going to dry up. And again, it's just a vicious cycle. So, work with us. We're here to help. My favorite definition of an entrepreneur is somebody who solves problems for profit. And that's exactly what we do. We're out there every day solving problems. We're making money at the same time. Great. That means we can keep doing it and we can keep solving more and more problems as we go along. So help us out and we'll help you out.
Yeah.
It's funny. There's almost this negative connotation around profit. I'm solving, the way you said that, we solve problems and there's a profit. And by the way, that's okay. All profit is an indication that the market is agreeing with your assumptions, your hypothesis, and your actions. If there's no profit, the market's saying you're wrong. Right. And so that's all that it is. And when people bitch about Jeff Bezos is making how many more hundreds of billions of dollars, the market says we like what you're doing and we agree with it and we're engaging with it. And that's the way it's supposed to work. And when I think about how much yelling and how much condemnation around profit there is today, with people saying, I get it, because they don't realize they're being ripped off by a system, but it's not freaking Jeff Bezos being richer. He's solving a huge problem. I mean, does anybody want to go back to the time where it took you had to go to 15 different stores to get different things and you spent your entire day, or you just go and you click buy now? Right. So we're not really having an honest conversation, because profit is, again, it's the market response to decisions that are being made. And where this gets tricky is when you have manipulation, when you have statism, when you have governments that are subsidizing things. That's not the market. That's people saying, wait, why is this company making all this money? That's not the market saying yes. That's lobbyists. That's actually corruption. So I can appreciate where people are pissed about profits, but those aren't honest profits. That's dishonest criminal crap that we've allowed based on our system of buying influence. So on our level of interacting with people, profit is honest feedback. Where people are getting pissed, it's generally not that. It's because people have paid to have systems manipulated and the government's in bed with them. And I mean, you get close enough to that stuff, you realize that's how the system plays out at the very highest levels. That's what people are pissed at for the most part, I think.
Yeah, that's absolutely a great point. Yeah. We provide value and people will reward us.
Yep.
All right. Our next article from NJ.com. 2 New Jersey men convicted in $4.5 million mortgage scam. I guess they forged documents, faked property ownership claims, and falsified escrow deposits to deceive a lender. Loan fraud is serious. So they actually staged a phony sale of Brooklyn properties and used loan proceeds to fabricate the required down payment. And then one defendant also admitted to securing $1.8 million in fraudulent pandemic relief loans by lying on federal applications. So, they were doing all this stuff. New Jersey.
It doesn't even matter. In terms of we can have these type of scams, and then 5 years goes by and people think that they're real creative and they do the same stuff. Like I remember seeing this stuff in 2006, and then after the meltdown, people had but there was a ton of the stuff. When money's moving, when there's a bull market, there's optimism. People think, oh, it'll just blend in. I think that there's a lot of that where they just go, what difference will it make? Everybody's making money. It's just moving up. And then as we've seen there's been plenty of that in the apartment space, and people creating some interesting pro formas around what reality was. And then when the tide goes out, it's like, oh, where did this come from? Oh, it was just an absolute guess, or we just plain said we're irrationally going to project that rents will double in the next 6 months, or crazy stuff. But it is funny that when you've been around a while, this is why it's really useful to not talk to a 20-year-old that's wanting to coach you, because they don't have a damn perspective on anything except high school football. It's really about getting around people that have been around and can say, yeah, I mean, I've literally seen this 3 cycles, 5 cycles. That's an incredible value, because you realize most things aren't new anymore. It's just the same thing, and it rhymes over and over again.
Yeah, it's like you said earlier, cheaters can cheat for a while, and you're probably going to get away with it for a little while until you don't, and then you get called out, and then you know what? Then you're done. And how do you ever come back from that? Once you've been convicted, once you've done jail time, once you've been caught at whatever you're doing, it's going to bite you in the butt. And then what? How do you ever get going back in that same industry or anywhere else? I mean, that's going to follow you forever. So it's just not worth it. Again, I applaud these guys. That's big money they're trying to go after. Something good, but man, the bigger the scam, the bigger the fall. That's going to be a massive blow to them and everybody else that defrauded. So yeah, you can do it for a little while, and then you're done. And then what? And then how do you ever recover from that? It's just not worth it. Yeah. Stay on the right side.
Agreed.
Yeah. And in today's digital world too, it's so easy to do a search and run a background check and find out on these people.
Yeah. It's so much harder to hide now.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of the process, like when we were putting together a syndication a few years ago, we ran background checks on all of the GPs, the partners, and something popped up on one of them, and we're like, okay, you're out. Like we none of us wanted that one person, spoiling the bunch. So it was good to do that due diligence, and it was easy. Just fill out some forms and pull the data. So
yeah.
Well, let's jump to our final fun news item from The Artful Parent: The Art of Letting Go. 10 things people hold onto decades longer than they should. I'll just read through the list here. Old grudges, outdated identities, other people's expectations, one-sided friendships, fear of being alone, past mistakes, old wounds from past love, destructive habits, need for universal approval, and belief that it is too late to change. Yeah. All good things to keep in mind, I suppose.
I like that very last one. I think that one really kind of encapsulates all of them, where if you don't think that there's any way to change or to do anything better or to be better or anything like that, then yeah, you're going to be stuck forever. So there's always a way out. There's always a possibility. I mean, look at anybody's story that has ever gone through anything and they come back better on the other side. Absolutely. You can always change. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
There's a theme along all these where people get stuck, and it's usually that they're not acknowledging the truth. And what is the truth, and how is it serving me? How is this grudge serving me? How is the fear of being alone serving me? Like it's funny. I look at these, and every one of them, I've got stories. I'm like, oh yeah, that was me then. I remember being in a relationship for a number of years, and part of my fear, this is during COVID too, part of my fear was, well, what if we break up and then I get COVID and then I get sick and then I'm by myself and then I die? Well, I'm dead. But I was very afraid of this. And so I stayed in this relationship for like an extra year because of that fear and the fear of being alone. And then we broke up, and a week later I got COVID. And I'm laughing. I'm like, well, son of a bitch. Like, really? This is how this is going to work. Like, the universe is saying, hey man, you're a dodo bird. You wasted a year. You could have moved on, but this is what you decided. And then the crazy part about people getting stuck in the past, the people that have wronged them, instead of thanking them for the experience and forgiving, like there's really, we get stuck and we're on this merry-go-round and people just live, it's Groundhog Day. Instead of having this whole life in front of them and their actual present, which is the only place we can live anyway. You hear people, I had a friend I'm not friends with anymore, but he was bitching about his business partner that it was this no good, dirty, rotten, blah, blah, blah. And he would say this. And I finally, it was like, God, this went on for like 10 years. And I finally said, hey, I don't want to hear about him ever again. You sound like an asshole. Like, you got to stop. And he just, it totally disrupted. It's like the way Tony Robbins will do a pattern interrupt. And he never brought him up again. And he one day, a year or two later, he goes, you know, I want to thank you for actually saying that. And a lot of times people are unconscious. So all these things that these things that we hold on to, we just keep doing them and we're not even conscious until somebody says it. So yeah, it can be hard, but I think one of the things that we can do, the greatest gifts we can give somebody is asking a question when they're doing something, like they're bitching about their neighbor or whatever, their life. And then asking a question, not saying you're an idiot, but like, is this helping you? Because they may get annoyed, but when somebody asks me that, I go back and think about it, and usually it does trigger it. So it's a huge gift for somebody to ask a question that makes you think.
Yeah,
yeah,
I love that. Ask a question. Just say, hey, so why? Why are you doing this? How's this helpful for you?
Might have a really good reason.
Yeah.
So probably not. It's probably a terrible reason when you actually think about it and you're like, oh man, I really do want to stop. Not I need to stop, but I really want to stop because I want something else. The whole needing thing is we won't do what we need. We'll do what we want. We'll do what feels good. And when somebody says you need to do this, you're like, F you, but when we want to do something, we want the chocolate cake and we'll do the things we want. So if we can want the thing, because it's like, yeah, that's actually screwing my life up, and here's what I really want. I want the actual love. I want the success. I want the healthy body, like all these things. When you really want it and it becomes non-negotiable, it's really interesting. But we tend to be blind. Like it's wild. We are just blind, and we're going through motions. And it's like, hey, what's working? Why do I want to change my relationship? It's only a left jab to the head. I can survive that every day. Why do people stay in these things? Because it's predictable. And the outside of that life is not predictable, and that's scary because it might mean death.
Yep.
Yeah. Have you guys heard of Klemmer? Klemmer. It's an organization, personal development and leadership. I was invited to it and have gone a few stages of it, but it really dives into these questions like what's serving you or not. Makes you think and creates that awareness, those questions that we should be asking ourselves, or a friend that cares brings it up. It's really helpful to kind of get unstuck. So many people are stuck in some way, so it's been really valuable for me. So
cool.
Just one suggestion I had somebody that reached out to me and said, hey, as somebody that cares, and then they unloaded their childhood trauma and projected their stuff on me. And I went, this isn't actually anything to do with me. And I didn't appreciate it. And I said, thank you. And then blocked them. I was done. So that doesn't help. You're projecting your own stuff. And that's, Nathan, the question, like asking the question, hey, have you thought about this? I'm just curious. Like, that's a really great way to approach anything. I was curious. Have you ever thought about this? I don't know what the answer is. I'm just wondering. And, no big deal. It just kind of plants a seed, and it's very gentle, and it's not like, your mother beat you, right? Well, that's why you can't have a relationship, because you're like, holy mackerel, what is happening? So just a thought.
We did this in a sense with our daughter who's dating a guy that nice kid, man, they were not right for each other. Like, so not right for each other. And everyone could see it but her. And so last Christmas, they've since broken up, which is great. But anyway, last Christmas I said, it's an observation. I'm not trying to tell you what to do or anything like that. Just an observation. He treats you like a buddy. That's what he does. He doesn't treat you like a queen. He treats you like a buddy. So just food for thought, and started, like you say, planted that seed. So something like that.
Yeah. Great. Well, that covers the news portion of our show, guys. I'd like to thank our sponsors, United States Real Estate Investor Advertising, Accelerated Capital at acceleratemycapital.com, Universe Media Publishing at universemediapublishing.com. And of course, thanks to our guests, Nathan Turner and Damian Lupo. You guys are awesome. Why don't you tell people how they can connect with you if you want them to connect? We'll start with Nathan.
Sure. Yeah. Best place to go is my website, earnestinvesting.com. That's EARNEST. But earnestinvesting.com, there's more information about note investing, how that works, link over to a conference we do every year about note investing. But that's the best place to go. Contact me there, all that kind of stuff. Love to chat.
Fantastic. Damian.
So I'm at, you can find me at Damian Lupo on X, and that's where I tend to chatter, and I'm available. Just direct message me there. If you're curious about the frame tech stuff, you can find frametech.com info about the disruptive manufacturing that we're doing. But direct to me, just go visit me on X.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Again, I'm your host, James Brown. Feel free to connect with me by going to Linktree/partner with James Brown. If you want help on your investing journey, you can book a time with me at jamesbrownrealestate.com/coaching. Also, huge thanks to our founder and producer, Antonio Holman with United States Real Estate Investor. And if you like the show, feel free to share it and follow or subscribe to This Month in Real Estate Investing at thismonthinrealestateinvesting.com or your favorite podcast app. And if you run across any interesting news, events, or suggestions for expert guests, feel free to share by emailing Antonio at UnitedStatesRealEstateInvestor.com. And remember, when one door closes, another door opens to financial freedom. See you next month.